an interesting question.
Well, and I would think that some of your employees, our collective employees, have lives outside of their work at public broadcasting. There are creative forces. I mean, a lot of people are very creative in the workforce, and so it's your example of the poetry slam. Somebody might be offended by the language they use or whatever, and suddenly it's, people have a life besides public broadcasting.
And
we have to live it.
And a lot of it is what they're saying. I mean, if general public would see something as despicable, then it's a problem. If it's something that I think some people would find to be art, when some people would find not to be art, that's probably not going to be a problem. I mean, my perspective.
Right.
I'm just saying, you're in a sort of gray area in terms of your policy. I mean, this is a slippery slope. As someone, I mean, who's been a journalist and signed payola and plugola things, it's, and I was concerned too if you're reining in someone's spouse or child.
We want to get back to that.
I know that was a bad example, but I do think,
not true.
You have a right when someone's talking about your work product, the place you work, some of those issues. I do think, just in general, if you're creating a policy, you really have to be mindful of people's First Amendment rights to freedom of expression and free speech.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And which is, go back to the things to try and balance out in all this. That's one I should have put in the slide. But it is definitely something we talked about as we were doing this. Like,
and this distinction I'd say about social media is, it's a legal distinction. You're saying forever, but it's the idea that you're publishing. And it's just, which is, the courts have yet to sort this out.
Right.
But I would wager that some of those same things will come into play when they finally get around to it.
That's right. So Twitter will be very interesting, because Twitter's only 140 characters.
Yeah, but it
it's
doesn't
very
matter.
conversational.
If it's a publishable
is
thing,
it? Yeah.
I
mean, at this point, if you're going to be in traditional media putting out stuff that might be considered, I don't know, questionable or challenging to PBS's policy, that stuff is probably going to end up online. You write a letter to the editor, like you said, it's going to end up online. You do a video something, or you're even at a poetry slam and somebody records it, that's going to end up online. The online space is where things go to live forever. So whether or not, that is also my question, do you make a distinction between people who are going directly to the online space and doing this, or they're in the physical world, which then gets translated to the virtual world?
Well, for that matter, somebody records it on their cell phone and then publishes
it online.
Right.
It doesn't even mean for them to do that.
Right. So what I'm saying is, I see what you're trying to do and I get it, but I also wonder, as the physical and the virtual worlds are collapsing, how can you make a policy that is?
Well, I'll give you the other extreme, right? So ESPN's social media policy, they've restricted any social media interaction for any of their online personalities, on-air personalities. So none of their hosts for SportsCenter and commentators are supposed to have blogs or Facebook or Twitter presence. And that was heavily criticized for a lot of these same reasons. And that's a place where we did not want to go. But they've restricted, they've made a blanket restriction on that.
Well, but that's the world of big buck personal services contracts.
Right. So they're protecting their assets, right? They view those guys as, or all those people as their, everything they're saying should belong to Disney, right?
You're dumb enough to sign that.
Hopefully they're paying them enough to make it worthwhile, right? But
exactly.
But there are other companies, if you go out and look at social media policies, who've taken positions that are closer to that than we have. We tried to take a very measured position to say, look, these principles, like, be careful about what you're doing, be careful about what you're saying. It's interesting, the poetry slam thing, like, what if that did show up on Facebook, and I don't know, it became a viral, it became something that was viral and posted lots of different places, and it had, I don't know, and it created some lines between artistic versus inflammatory. It would be an interesting thing to sort out. I don't know, to tell you the truth, I don't have the answer off the top of my head.
The other thing I would say too, that thinking about being mindful of what PBS, or in my case VPT or whatever, you're a media company, and our mission is to provide different viewpoints and not to, prevent anybody from expressing things. So I think you walk that fine line,
that's right.
And as long as you do that in that spirit, I think you're
That's
okay.
a nice way to say it, and that's what we've been trying to convey with the employees too. Is there's a lot of don'ts and limits here, But in general, we want you to feel like there's a big landscape out there. You should explore it. We want
And you
to-
said that
Yeah.
initially.
And it, yeah, in the policy we read, it's we strongly encourage people to be out there.
Yeah.
Be smart. Be
We should
smart
talk about the last question,
Okay.
because we've kind of, not
That
the
one,
next
okay.
one, we've kind of talked
That's
about the
true.
political views.
Okay.
This is actually something that we've run into a lot. I'm in the communications department, so I work with the people who do the press releases and make announcements, and so this is something that you deal with a lot. And the question is, what if I know of a major online launch or new initiative at PBS? Can I tweet about it or put on Facebook, that kind of thing? We tell them no. Until we actually formally announce it, we would like you to keep it to yourself, and that's pretty obvious. But we felt we needed to be really explicit about that. One thing that's really been helpful with this policy is we tell people you can tweet about this when you see that, or put on Facebook when you see that it's out on PBS and social media venues. When it's out there, it's fair game. Please let everyone you know about it, who you think might be interested, if you want to talk about it. But otherwise, those are the kinds of things you should be keeping to yourself. And that includes cute oblique tweets when you're talking about projects, to try to, because people can read into things when you're talking about a project or a big launch or something along that line, to be careful about that kind of thing. Don't really go out with it until PBS has said, okay, now it's fine to talk about it. So that was something that I think had come up several times. We wanted to let people know about it as well. So are there any other questions beyond what we've talked about? Susan?
I've also wondered about like text messages, and as I think about my nieces and nephews who text everything, and I text them something, and I mean, do you ever see that or the mobile?
We never dealt with texts.
You never have.
No,
Do you
but
see it becoming an issue?
well, I'm hearing more and more that it's discoverable, and it just came up. It's coming up in the Michael Jackson case with the doctor who's accused of, being implicated. So I just heard yesterday actually that they took his phone, but that's a completely different case. But we never got into texts.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a private communication.
Yeah, it's just exactly. And
But
this
some
is
companies do distinguish if the phone that you're using is a company-issued phone,
Right.
or even in cases where you've had a private phone and it's been on company time.
Right. They pay a portion of my bill.
we have not really gotten into that. So.
Question from the back.
Is one in the back?
The former Vietnam Rights sent to prison or text messages, so, right?
What's that? Say that again?
We can't hear it.
The former mayor of Detroit was sent
Oh, that's
to
right.
prison for text messages,
Right.
so I think that's a pretty strong case.
We never got into it, and actually, interestingly, Susan, it never came up as a question in any of the. I think we've done
Yeah.
4 or 5 brown bags. Text never came
It seems
up.
to be more like investigations of crimes. If
Yeah.
you're specifically going to find something to support a case of crimes, I haven't really seen like employers kind of
Yeah.
overseeing it or making sure. that
The company
they
phone
have
thing,
details
back to
for
this
that.
point, is important. But it's a completely different realm. It's not what we're kind of talking about here.
Again, I think because I would be calling it lives forever, but it's a publishing concept, right? That's a private communication.
Unless you're Brett Favre.
No,
Unless
sorry,
you're
gosh, and I never get calls. I was wondering, we keep hearing, well, the law hasn't caught up with this yet. When is the law going to catch up? It seems like, there's precedents out here that are,
When somebody sues somebody.
When somebody sues somebody and
Well,
they
Matt-
want to go and the litigants want to go all the way through the
Well,
process.
didn't Matt Drudge get sued years ago? He had something on his site about, somebody beat his wife or something, and there's some kind of lawsuit. That was
I'm
years
not
ago, and I
familiar with
don't.
that one. Yeah, no, but it's more like the Twitter and the Facebook suits that haven't. There are a couple of others that I've used as examples in other presentations, but they settle. They've settled out of court generally
Yeah,
because
yeah.
people they don't want to. The risks of unknown. There's so much unknown in this, and litigation already is a big risk. So you throw that on top, and
It's really
most companies
fascinating.
just
There
won't.
hasn't been something, some really big case that you
Yeah.
can kind of point
Yeah.
back to yet.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead.
I'm just curious, we did our social media policy 2-3 years ago, and it took a long time to put together, and then it's just sat there.
Where are you from?
KT. And I'm wondering if you have a recommendation on how often this gets revisited, kind of as a follow-up to the fact that, laws change, new social media applications come.
That's a really good question, and we I try to keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on, so especially like Foursquare, that's a whole nother application of social media that as we were doing this, like people weren't really using that much, and I don't know if it'll have any impact, it may or may not. For us, it's kind of easy right now because we wrote it and we're involved with it. I think given how quickly it changes, it's probably worth taking a look at every other year, maybe probably every year seems a little bit much. But just take a look at, because you think about 2 years ago, and most people hadn't really heard of Twitter even at that point. And 2 years from now, I mean, I can't even imagine what the landscape might look like. So it's probably worth taking a look at every couple of years, is what I guess. Any other questions? I think we're probably out of time anyway.
Yep, well, thank you very much. Please fill out the evaluation forms. Thank you, gentlemen. That was excellent.